Hey people, this video is going to be about paradigms, paradigm shifting, chaos magic, and what I like to call the palette of powers. Now, I was first introduced to this idea that's referred to as chaos magic when I was like 16 or 17. Um, Picked up a book by Pete Carroll just called, what the hell was it? Liber Chaos, or the Book of Chaos. And a lot of interesting stuff in there. The crux of it is basically the idea that no one metaphysical system gives you a completely accurate description of metaphysics, magic, and spirituality. Inherent in his work seemed to be almost a form of nihilism, like this idea that there is no truth, so you can make up whatever truth you want. And that can be very liberating. You know, it led me to really get a lot more creative in my practices, led me to open up my eyes to a much broader realm of available knowledge rather than trying to find the one system that was right. I realized none of them are entirely accurate, so I can draw from any I want and fill in the gaps myself and get really creative with it. But then as I got exposed to more of the academic sciences and how that word paradigm is really used outside of metaphysics, that's when it really started to make more sense to me, because if you look at, say, psychology, the study of the human mind, there are many different paradigms that psychologists use to look at the mind. Whether it's your Freudian paradigm, whether it's your Maslow paradigm, whether it's your uh, behaviorist paradigm or your humanist paradigm or the more modern transpersonal paradigm or all the other different paradigms, none of them give you a completely accurate description of the totality of the human mind. Some even seem to contradict each other, despite the fact that they can be very effective and accurate in certain circumstances. And it's because the mind is just so vastly complex that no one paradigm gives you the complete picture. So you have these paradigms of psychology looking at it from different angles, and sometimes there's overlap, and sometimes there's not, and sometimes there even appears to be contradiction, and yet they're all describing the same thing. And the mind is very real, it has existence, and yet none of these paradigms used to describe it are the one and only accurate paradigm. So that's something I brought into this approach of multiple paradigms, is the idea that it's not that no truth exists. It's not that this whole spirituality and magic thing is purely in our imagination and purely dependent upon whether or not we choose to believe that it exists. The reason we have so many different paradigms and so many different angles to work from is that it's such a radically complex and diverse thing we're looking at that no one of our paradigms is a sufficiently complete explanation. So whether you're looking at it from the Wicca or ceremonial magic paradigm, or a voodoo paradigm, or a Christian paradigm, or an energy paradigm, or a quantum physics paradigm, or a Buddhism paradigm, or a New Age paradigm, or an alien teachings paradigm, or an atheistic, purely based on observation paradigm, a materialistic paradigm even, has something to offer to spirituality and a element of truth to bring in our quest for a complete understanding of the nature of existence. But each one of these is an incomplete picture of the whole. Now, one thing I've seen a lot of with people first starting to grasp this idea that no one paradigm is inherently correct is the idea that any paradigm is relatively equal. And I go back and forth on that one, because when you adopt a very simplistic paradigm, one that takes your whole like mental structure and just says one simple answer, apply it uniformly to the whole, the brain can shut up now and we can move on to experience. Um, and there is some validity to that. I mean, if you look at law of attraction manifestation ideas, that's all about a very, very simplistic paradigm and getting the whole mental field to achieve a state of homogenized conformity. That way it's all operating in the same way, and that increases one layer of your psychic energy, because it doesn't actually increase it, it just gets it all doing the same thing at the same time. um, the standard imported Western Buddhist paradigm is relatively simple and allows you to bring your focus to very centered space. But on the other hand, and there are a lot of teachings about that, that's a pretty popular concept, so I'm not going to go into that too much further. I think it's self-explanatory for people who've been looking into these things for a while. But the other side of it is the need for more complex paradigms, the need for the superior and more accurate paradigms. Um, and this is something that I sometimes find frustrating, where people are like, any paradigm is as good as any other. Whatever I'm using, it's all good. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to make fun of you for it. I mean, I probably have some areas of my own conception that are lacking too. But the complexity of our paradigms allows us to embody a greater diversity of energies, a greater diversity of experiences and transformative events. And it allows us to mentally and emotionally interact with a much more diverse range of elements within the universe and range of beings within the universe. And so, as we're seeking improvement and a deepening of our perspective and a broadening of our understanding, we need to seek paradigms that allow for that depth and breadth. So a lot of the videos I create and a lot of the things I talk about come from a combination of paradigms that work really well for me. I draw a lot on yoga. You know, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali were incredibly influential to me. And then some of the yoga and Hindu teachings that made it into ceremonial magic in the late 19th, early 20th century, tattwas and all of that have been influential on me. And then, of course, there's the ceremonial paradigm and the Kabbalistic paradigm and the Hermetic paradigm and the Wiccan pagan paradigm and all these paradigm and, the quantum physics paradigm has been influential on me. The chaos paradigm, some of the hippie paradigms, the Lyrian paradigm, these have all been very influential on my thinking, and modern psychology as a paradigm has been very influential on me. To an extent, even atheism and agnosticism have been very influential on me. The deep and abiding agnosticism is not in a way to say that I lack belief or knowledge of the spiritual realms, but that unwillingness to put the end at the end of the book. That unwillingness to say, bam, got it, picture's complete, no more work needs to be done, I know it all, done. That agnosticism that forces the mind to continually acknowledge mystery and continually be open to mystery is something that I've found to be immensely enriching as a human being. So, how do our beliefs and our paradigms influence our living experience? How can it influence our magical practices and our abilities as we're seeking to develop abilities like divination or telepathy, or the ability to successfully cast spells or perform healing, or all these different disciplines that we engage in? How do our paradigms affect this? That's where the idea of a palette of powers comes into play. And palette of powers is just one way of saying the total spectrum of energies and abilities and transformations at every layer of reality that your paradigm or collection of paradigms allows for. One palette of powers I like to use is the elemental palette. This is something that goes back thousands of years in the West and in the East, presented a little differently by a couple of different cultures, but it's one that's easy to tune into for people. And this is one that I encourage a lot of people to really get into the elemental paradigm, because it's well developed, it's deep, it's primal, you know. You can tap into energies that have like a substantial feeling to them and are relatively easy to direct, and life forms and intelligences that come with these energies. And even beyond that, the paradigms themselves have inherent with them not just energetic qualities, but other realms of existence that they link to, and patterns of human experience within the psychology, within the heart, within the higher astral planes as we're exploring out of body and through the dream realms, but also patterns of events and energies in the physical and manifest world. So as we tap into The elemental paradigm, it's a very easy, very well-developed one that permeates the collective consciousness and collective unconsciousness. That is a nice paradigm to explore because it's so well developed. And then we can tweak it and make it our own. For me, one of my most radical, like, I guess, personal realizations with the elemental paradigm is when I was looking at the difference between the Chinese five elements and the Western five elements. Western five elements and the Hindu five elements, different terminology, but basically talking about the same energies. But the Chinese five elements are a little different. The Chinese five elements don't have spirit and they don't have air, but they do have three different things that the West might all classify as earth. So I see the Chinese and Western five elements, they're looking at the same thing, but from different enough angles that some of it's overlapping, but they're both seeing something the others aren't seeing. The Chinese five elements are keying into something important that the Western five elements miss, and the Western five elements are keying into something important that the Chinese five elements miss. So I grafted them together to get a 7-element system. So you have spirit, air, fire, water. Earth, I break into 3, the way the Chinese 5 elements break it into 3. So that in earth, you have earth, metal, and wood. And the way I would describe these is to say that the physical earth, the physical substance, the molecular structures of substance, that's what they're calling metal or mineral earth. This can be your blood, this can be the molecules in the air, this can be a tree or a rock, grass, this can be plastic, glass, whatever. It is the physical molecular structure of the dense plane is what they're referring to as metal earth. Wood, on the other hand, this is like the Gaia principle, that which causes growth, okay? The force that turns an acorn into a tree, that motivating energy, that's your wood energy, that's your growing Gaia energy. It's the same energy that causes a zygote to turn into a fetus, to turn into a baby, to turn into a grown human. It's that force which causes us to be expanding and growing. It's that which brings order to the universe. It's that creative power that brings this ascending curve of complexity to our universe. And then in the earth, what the Chinese 5-element system just calls earth, that's where I put that element of earth that a lot of people use for grounding as a place to put negative energy so that it can be recycled. It correlates very well to legends of, say, Hecate. And Hecate is cauldron, where all things which are dead are mixed together and boiled down to their constituent elements, and then new things are birthed from it. That view of the goddess of death, or fell energy, it's this entropy principle which breaks down physical matter into its constituent elements. There's the Gaia force, which causes this increasing complexity and growth, and when the Gaia force leaves, this fell force, or this dark earth, breaks it back down. Entropy principle. And these two polarities are operating on this metal or this mineral earth, this molecular structure of our three-dimensional reality. So that's one area where a more complex paradigm in my spellcasting and my magical endeavors has been immensely beneficial to gain a greater ability. I like to play around with plants and see how I can change plants with will, and breaking that earth into 3 completely different energies has improved that ability immensely. The ability to affect electronic systems by using that molecular mineral earth and combining it with water and fire has been immensely beneficial. The more complex palette of powers opens so many more doors for actual occurrences. So when we're looking at different paradigms, the key isn't exactly what paradigms you're using. The key is the availability of accurate reflection of that which is experienced. When you take complex, diverse experience of life and try to boil it down into this tiny little paradigm, you're not really allowing this paradigm to interact with the full complexity. the more complex the paradigm, while still maintaining some kind of cohesion. There are going to be gaps, there are going to be contradictions, because you're looking at the same thing from different angles. So they're just apparent contradictions. But the more complexity you allow yourself is the more complexity you allow your mind and your spirit to interact with all the various potentialities of our incarnate experience. What paradigms do you like working with? What paradigms do you wish you had spent more time exploring? How comfortable are you with the eternal question mark?